I think
Okay.
the stream ended. So
Okay.
let's try again.
Okay.
Let's see if we can get any confirmation that
Oh,
we
yeah.
are live or
We
not.
are we are live on YouTube. I see us.
Okay.
And
Well, thank you.
can you hear us? There you go. Okay. Yeah.
Oh no. Okay, it's on LinkedIn. Started a whole new event. So if you're in the LinkedIn one, apologies.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Okay.
Whoops. And I'm not used to wearing earbuds, and one just popped out. So,
Okay.
well, that was
Hey
fun.
everybody. That was yeah. Woo! Clearly we are going live today. So
Mhm.
thank you guys all for tuning in and sorry about that little technical glitch. I hope everyone did. Belinda, did you have a good fourth?
I did. It was kind of quiet. I am, we're in the process of selling our house and moving. So I am in the old house by myself, trying to pack things up. It was nice and quiet, but I was finally able to do some binge watching and finish the marvelous Miss uh, Maisel last night. So I was quite happy. So yeah, it was a good night.
That was an excellent ending on that, wasn't that?
Yeah, I like the way they kept going back and forward in time. And so they were able to tell their whole story and catch up things. So yeah, I liked the very end. I thought that was a pretty cool thing to do. And I see I gotta stop for a second because I see Fernando is wishing us all of his US friends a happy 4th of July too. So thank
Oh,
you, Fernando, because
yes.
we didn't reciprocate on May the 5th for you. So my apologies, my friend.
Yeah. Well, yes, and we are doing the traditional BI house switch. Guy in the cube is moving. Belinda's moving. I know a number of other people are in the process of moving as well. We've packed up. Our house is all in boxes. Right outside of this little realm or world that you can see, we are boxed up in here. We're ready for the event that a home opens up, and we're gonna buy it. So, but we have just kind of dove right into this stuff. So, welcome everyone to the chat. Belinda, for those of you who out there who are watching this on Restream or watching, connecting in, do you want to give an update? Like, what's your background? You want to introduce yourself?
So what's my story? So
Yes.
okay, yeah, it's I right out of college, I in college when it comes to technology, there wasn't a lot going on now, but Lotus Symphony had just come out. I remember I was supposed to do a report using Lotus Symphony, and I didn't even use it, and I still got a good grade on it. Apparently, a lot of people that way, but it took I did a little bit, but I just wasn't into technology back in the 80s like that, or the early 80s. So I had fun building an app in Basic. I think we built a mortgage calculator,
Okay.
but yeah, that was a long time ago. So anyhow, I was in the hotel business managing a Hampton Inn right out of college, and my now husband was also managing a Hampton Inn, and he wanted to own his own business. So I moved closer to him because I was about to get shipped off to California, and
Okay.
so and then so we just said, well, why not start up a business? So initially we did like the bookkeeping. We were the liaison between small businesses and their CPAs, and that kind of led us. He was implementing. He was a controller for several hotels, and he was implementing Solomon. And so we started using Solomon. And then the next thing we know, we met someone from Great Plains who said, "Hey, we need someone in this area to be an installer." And that really kind of got our journey going. So starting with using Quicken to help be that liaison, and moving into Solomon, and which is now SL, and then moving into Great Plains, which is now GP. That was like 33 years ago or so. And so maybe 34 years ago, actually. Yeah, 34 years ago. So, and then we just started um, doing all kinds of technology. Our technology kept getting skills, and our in-depth piece just kept getting longer and longer. I still try to work with SMB businesses, and to me, SMB is a complex one-person shop to
Mm.
just below a Fortune 5,000 that doesn't have a lot of complexity. So it is the majority of businesses, and I know that doesn't sound very. I always talk about trying to be remarkably specific, and that doesn't sound very remarkably specific. But when you're dealing with ERP, it basically is. I don't do manufacturing. I do distribution. I started out doing a lot of payroll things, so I understand payroll processes and taxes, but not so much after that. So basically, what we call GLAP, or the general ledger, accounts payable, accounts receivable, bank reconciliation, and I'm also cool with inventory and distribution, not warehousing, which is very specific, and not manufacturing. But yeah, so that's my remarkably specific. I should have shared it with you. So there's a picture of me back in DOS days, we were in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina at the time, at a Chamber of Commerce trade show. And this is one where the monitor is like huge and the screen is small, and you could see that we had graphics on the screen. So we were like big adopters in visually creating reports for people to understand very, very early on. So I claim that I've been in Power BI or in BI all along. And then I got involved in Crystal. So my big thing dealing with ERP systems was typically reporting, doing
Okay.
reporting with Crystal reports. And so then I moved on to more Excel, started getting some better tools. So for analysis, so I moved on to Excel a lot as well. And so when Power BI came out, when it was the SharePoint Online piece that
Oh,
used,
yes.
yeah, that's when I dove in, and I'm like, oh, this is the coolest thing ever, and you could put a Power View report, you could put, a power map, which I still think is one of the coolest visuals that you could get. Um,
Right. And they still not at par, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So we got involved then, and then Microsoft. Some people at Microsoft said, "Hey, hello, we're going to do something different with Power BI. Come join." And now we have what we have today. So that's kind of my story. I would about the same time I became a Microsoft certified trainer for GP, and then about that same time I became an MVP for GP. But when Microsoft said, hey, come over to our side, our logo will eventually be green and we'll have greener patches. I mean, they didn't say that about the logo, but so I then got switched. Microsoft switched me from GP to
Huh.
Power BI, and no looking back. I kind of like dropped all of GP, and now,
Well, that is fantastic. And
yeah.
honestly, so I love the evolution, and I'm even going to point out this is like the picture we use in the thumbnail. I love
Mhm.
the evolution of your style. I mean, like there's nothing wrong with this. This is good, but I like your style. I like your hats. I like your glasses. I like the way you do your hair now. It just it's more. I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I like the way that's happened. So
Yeah, well, you know what? Part of it is you get older.
oh yeah,
And
yeah.
so, I figure I'm got 10 more years that I'll
Okay.
have fun working. And so now I try to do things that are just fun. And um, also with that came a lot of self confidence in just being Belinda,
Yeah.
and so, yeah, it's not blue hair, Fernando. I have lavender hair more often than not. Right now, I may look blue just because I haven't put any color in it in a while. But yes, I do love the funky glasses. I will put a rinse of color in my hair, and yes, my wonderful friends at we have a wonderful group. A lot of them are here today that meet every Saturday morning, and as Kristen Engel just put it in. I am known to wear my pajamas almost every Saturday morning. If I'm dressed, it's a miracle on Saturday morning. So coffee in my pajamas and I'm ready to go. So, but
Um,
like I told you guys last week, you were all like, I feel like you're all my cousins. I know all of you so well. So, yeah, what do I care?
all right. Well, uh, and to the whole point, I mean, we hope everyone feels like this is a very conversational topic that we're going to be going through today.
Mhm,
But we are doing this for like we wanted to expose this to other people to make sure you're aware of it. So we are following the guy in the cube rules, right? Rule one. Please prefix any questions with a Q so we can make sure that those get queued up and we can put those onto the screen. And then rule two, please don't repeat any questions or spam the stuff. It just gets annoying. We haven't had that much. We have a pretty good crowd here, so let's just keep that up and running. All right. So awesome. I just want to make sure we covered that before we dove right into these conversations and topics. So if you have
mhm,
questions, um, I want to like please prep those, put those in the queue and in the chat.
mhm,
We'll get those in. But Belinda, you
mhm,
gave a presentation that I saw at Data Insight Summit around enabling and Power BI,
mhm.
and I clearly you're a master in the space. You know quite a bit about it. Um, how did you get into talking about Power BI enablement?
Well, I won't say I'm a master, but
Okay.
I will say if you do not get users to adopt what you're putting out there, then you are going to crash and burn. Your
Yep.
projects aren't going to work. And if you're a consultant, you're going to have a hard time getting paid. You're going to have a hard time. It's going to drag on forever. It's not good for businesses. It needs to move in. So, um, implementing software for so many years, was, and especially because we also supported it. It doesn't
Mhm.
even matter what piece of software you're talking about. One of the things that I learned is there are resistors every time you implement something new. And those resistors will try to find a way to circumvent procedures that are put
Mhm.
in place and try to avoid using it and
Mm.
trying to get something out of it. So many years ago, I started thinking about the people that are or that we're working with, and it's funny. Great Plains, before Microsoft bought them, they talked a lot about this. So it's kind of like, I guess it was drilled into me from a very early time. And actually, at that point, the company was owned by Doug Burgum, who is the governor of North Dakota, who incidentally is has thrown his hat in the ring for president of the United States. They're running in the next election. I thought that was interesting. But this was something he talked about. Yeah, yeah. So how sad, how weird is it that you could say, "Hey, yeah, I know the president of the United States. Would he let me in the White House? Nah." But
Well, it's about time we get someone with like has some background in technology. I mean, we've got all these
yeah,
lawyers, business people. Let's get some people with some technology and systematic approaches to things. That's what
yeah.
I want to see. In,
He's a
so
really smart guy
yeah.
and definitely well versed in technology. But I digress.
Okay.
So I remember I went to a at this point we were still living in Myrtle Beach
Hmm.
before we sold our business and moved to New York for 18 years. So this was quite some time ago, and they had a partner event and they happened to hold it in Myrtle Beach. We're like, this is crazy. They never have anything in Myrtle Beach. So we went and someone was talking about implementations. It was another partner giving presenting this, and in the implementations he likened everyone in the implementation, and this could be true of anything, Power BI, Fabric included, uh, to the characters of Gilligan's Island. Now, some of the younger people probably don't know or are not intimately familiar with the characters of Gilligan's Island, but they're all pretty much like that. There's the smart one, like the professor. There's
Mm.
people like the house, where it was always better at the club. There's, Gilligan, who is always interested in trying to help, but a bubble, a buffoon in it, right?
Okay.
And then, there's the nice one like Marianne and so forth. But anyhow, so they likened that to the people there, and so um, at that point, um, I started thinking about the individual. So, what motivates that individual? What can I get that individual to go? So, it's something I started thinking about for a long time. And one of the things as CRM, I mean, we were big ACT users back in DOS days. So, we've always believed in a CRM system. But one of the things as more people started implementing CRM is there's nothing in CRM that forces users um, to use a system, right? I mean, they might not do as well, but there's nothing to force them. And as I thought about that with Power BI, there's nothing to force a lot of these people to use Power BI. So we have to motivate them in different ways. And so this is something that I had started thinking about. And your homage to Matthew Roche with your questions and the swords, and even his data god picture. Um, he talks a lot um, about this as well, and he and Melissa Coates have enticed me so many times with things that they've said. And of course, I call Melissa, I tell her all the time, I've known her for before Power BI, and I tell her
What was before Power BI?
well, she was in
I
SQL.
have no recollection of those years.
um, yeah, thank goodness for me and my twilight years of technology. They gave me a fun tool to work with. So,
Right.
but yeah, so like, how do we motivate these individuals to improve their business, and what do we get them thinking about it, and then how do we get business owners to embrace the ideas of using a business intelligence application? And now, as AI is becoming so prevalent with things like ChatGPT and Copilot and all of these other things, regardless of fear factor, then this is another thing. Yeah. So this is a slide. I've had this so long, I don't even remember where I got it. And so I love this slide. So it has the traditional Power
I'm
BI
quoting you as
pieces.
the source at this point, Belinda.
Okay. All
What is
right.
it? You have to attribute three times, then it's allude to that you got it from somewhere else twice, and then from then on out, it's yours. So
Oh, okay. Then in that case, it was mine probably
this,
about 5 years ago.
this
So,
is, yeah,
yeah, I think the original source was probably Microsoft. But why is AI important? Because I also, one of my favorite talks is built-in AI inside of Power BI. And
sure.
so, because there's a lot of built-in features that a lot of people don't think about as being AI, but we're so used to these descriptive analytics on the left, where we're looking about at what happened. And I'm going to skip over diagnostic for a moment and go to streaming. And we're getting more and more comfortable with that. A lot of people try to do that all the time when they do the direct connection or the live connection. And quite frankly, the reality is for many businesses, through last night is basically what's happening right now. If you get everything through yesterday, you're getting what happened right now. There are some businesses, obviously, where you need more of those streaming analytics. If you were Amazon, for example, sales come in so quickly, you probably want to get them faster. Or if you're doing anything in the world of finance, you probably want to monitor it faster. But for the most part, or a restaurant might even want to monitor it faster. But for the most part, yeah, most businesses, what happened through yesterday is real time analytics. So that works as well. But a lot of people skip over that second one. Why did it happen? And there is a lot of great things. So I love talking about that. But the AI piece, or the advanced analytics piece, typically happens beyond that. What will happen, and how do we make it happen? And so there are, ML's been out there for a while. I know I told you this story before, but I saw ML. Gosh, it was it was before Power BI, come to think of it. And
Yeah.
I saw it at a SQL Saturday in Boston. And they one of the Microsoft guys showed it, and it was in preview then, uh, public preview, and I looked at it and I'm like, oh, this is the coolest thing ever. And so they said, well, you could, they gave me a script and said, play with it. And so I started playing with it, and I'm like, it is actually very easy to use. What makes it hard is knowing which algorithm to use. And that is what makes it hard. That's where you have to have an understanding. And so, and of course, you also have to know what it is you want to know before you can use that particular tool. But ML, I love the way they put it into premium for Power BI, where you just say, "Hey, I wanted to calculate, test it for when you're testing my data and learning from my data set, Mister Azure." Then, um, uh, you know, here's how long you can test, and it'll go through and it's try to find the best algorithm for you. Because understanding the algorithms is one thing, and understanding the probability that it's going to come up with a correct one and which one you should use as a result of that. It's not always necessarily the one with the highest probability. That's which I don't get. So that's why I've stayed out of ML up to this point. But yeah.
Well, and I think some of the stuff we're about to, or we're seeing now with Fabric, and maybe that is the graduation when we talk about enablement and adoption, right? Like the journey is okay. Start playing a little bit in Excel, or I'm sorry, in Power BI with the features that are there, and then as your needs grow and as you need to get more into this, hey, Fabric is right there, and now you can start to run your AI ML experiments, and when Power BI is suddenly not necessarily doing everything for you, you've taken those classes and you're like, hey, I want more control. Well, now you can just have a little more control, right?
Yeah, totally, totally. And it also, I think, makes it I love that Fabric now. I'm so happy that Fabric exists,
Mm-hmm.
mostly because it's nice that we being Power BI belong officially with a group and a family of products, because it, even though there's always been the stack and there's always been better together,
Yep.
it's always been like, oh, we have to go over to Azure, because a lot of people think Power BI, Power Platform, and we are part of Power Platform, but we're actually more part of Azure than we are part of the Power Platform. And so, even though it's always been together, it always hasn't come across that way to users. So now that we have a plethora, if you will, of products, I'm bringing
Yep.
out my fancy words today. Then, yeah, we've got like, yeah, ML definitely part of our group. So, yeah, we
Oh,
should
and
use it.
actually, I'm going to even use that to interject into one of the questions that we had pop in.
Okay.
Sean Donovan over on LinkedIn. I don't know if you know Sean. Sean's a good guy, works over at
Mhm.
Microsoft in the BI space. But he asked, what's the most memorable BI project you help implement? And I'll quick do a little story, then we'll go over
Mhm.
to you while you're thinking about this, Belinda.
Mhm.
But I actually built out a Power View dashboard that was integrated with an ML backend that we imported stuff into, allowing people to find losses and opportunities inside of the data set that they were working with. And that worked out incredibly well, highly successful. Loved it. How about yourself, Belinda?
Um, I would have to say this is a story I shared with Rob Colley on his podcast. But if you're asking about memorable, I have to share it. So this kind of goes back to like the early. It has to do with that power map in Excel that I
Mm-hmm.
talked about, which I absolutely love. And for those of you who don't know what that is, it's a map where you can. It's like part chart over time on a map. So you could watch things happen over time on the map. So I was at that point I was still working predominantly with GP, and I was just starting my transition over, and I was living in New York City at the time, and someone worked. There was an ISV for elevator service repair that worked with GP, and so He asked me, since it was all GP related, if I'd go work the this elevator repair conference, talk about an industry specific in the expo. And I said, of course. It was just one day. It was up in the Bronx, and I said, of course, I'd be happy to do that. And so I went in to get the 311 data for New York City. Now, if you live in a smaller town, you probably don't have an equivalent to 311. 311 is where you call in New York City if you have something you need to report and nobody's bleeding, or about to die, right? So this is where you call 311 instead of 911. 911 is way too busy to handle, like an elevator not working. So, or
I
elevator
gotcha.
complaint. Yeah. So I went to the 311. I got all the elevator complaints for the city over the past year, and I put them in Power Map. So you could watch these buildings over the past 12 months. You could see the number of complaints show by. And the reason why I loved this was because, and elevator industry is pretty connected, right? Not everybody,
Ah,
but there's a lot of connect.
yeah.
So everyone that came up to the booth, and I had my Surface out. It was like the little RT Surface, because that was all that was out then. And I had my little RT Surface out, and I had Excel on there, and they were seeing this map over time. Everybody who saw it brought someone else to it, and everybody said one of two things without exception. Either they said, "That's amazing," or they said, "I can't believe that's public knowledge." And so I kind of knew which buildings people had, but that was seeing the reactions just got me really excited about it. And it's still something I kind of hang on to today. So that would be my most memorable one. So yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I can't believe that's public knowledge.
Yeah, I can't believe it's public knowledge. And I'm like, but it's interesting because when I showed it at other events later, um, in New York at some different events, everyone wanted to look at their building where they lived or they worked.
Oh,
So I thought that was pretty funny because, like, I remember the building I lived in. I remember, I really only remember one time it got stuck, and it was on 4th of July. Come to think of it, because we had an amazing view of the Hudson River from our rooftop, and so everybody would try to go up to the rooftop to watch fireworks, and they got stuck. And so, or someone got sick, and the ambulance came and went up and got stuck. And the police were with them. So the police and the ambulance people were stuck in the elevator. So the firemen then had to come and unstuck them. So yeah, that was
unstick them.
unstick them, unstuck them, unstick them. Yeah. I'm in the
uh,
South now. I could say it either way.
that's just fine. Um, well, that's awesome, and it's kind of cool to see the different ways that people use data to change their lives and change their behaviors. But
Hmm.
when we think about like growing that and getting that adoption inside of a company, I think we had one like, hey, in fact, this came from Fernando. Like, what are your top five pieces of advice for report adoption or Power BI adoption?
First of all, make sure you know who your executive sponsor is. So, who in the company wants this to happen? You need to
Mm.
know who that is. And you need to let them know right at the very beginning. This is number two, that there's going to be resistance and you have plans to handle it, but you might be letting them know about that as well. Number three, find the Excel guru in the company and make them your friends. They will also probably be reluctant, but even though they're going to be reluctant, if you take the time to make sure they know how to use Power Query inside of Excel and show them some extra cool things so they can even become more the Excel guru. And then eventually you could get them to help you check the data using their mad Excel skills. Then they're going to eventually want to become a Power BI guru. So I think that's something that would be hugely beneficial. Beyond that, there's a lot of different approaches you could take. I think you need to make sure you make the data very easy to use, meaning put some good help buttons on there, even if it goes to another window. Try to, you know, let them have their table like they say they want, but hide that page and give them a way to click to it so that they'll eventually start seeing, hey, the numbers match, and they might just start looking at the numbers individually. And Dan, a good friend of ours, Dan Messner, he even makes a GIF of how the report should work and puts that in as the tooltip, which I think is a brilliant thing to do. And then my favorite is one of the things. Oh, actually, this is kind of goes back to something I started doing more and more of because of you, Chris, because of the book club that you had, where we went through that book about displaying data, letting your data storytelling. And oh yeah, if you guys haven't watched it, you should. There you go. You should watch the book club on YouTube. It's a good book. But one of the things they talked about is the title itself should be descriptive or explanatory, not just descriptive. So I have, thanks to Smart Narratives, Microsoft, I have started putting in like date ranges because again, remember I'm working mostly with ERP, and if it's working with customers, I might put in customer grouping and things like that, and I put that in as part of the Smart Narrative. So um, it will actually say, you know, like this is sales for the date range for all customers or just customers in this group. And I'll put down whatever other piece I want in there. So that way, when you click on something and you filter the whole report, the title will also change. Um, you know, even if you just put text out there, that's still considered a visual. So you might as well just load it up with good stuff in there. And then that way you could take advantage of using the filter on the side pane and people will know what they look at. Yeah. Those are the first five I came up with off the top of my head.
Well done. Great job.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. The easier we can make it for people so they can access this stuff, understand what they're doing, right? And I think one of the things you had brought this up before was uh, we were kind of getting into that, the whole Gilligan's Island thing, right? Understanding the personas of the people you're working with, I think really helps you drive all those things.
It does. It does. And because you could basically build report pages for some of those individuals, somebody else who won't, that just kind of like it's the wallflower in the back. They could be either way. And at that point, you can, um, you could book meetings with Mr. Python. This is true, Bernard, in the world of fabric. That's a good thing. So
I will say I have a video that's launching tomorrow about like getting an AdventureWorks data set up and running inside Fabric so you can build out stuff. It goes end to end, and I need some Python in there. And in fact, a little bit of Python goes a long, long way. So a big shout out to Mim on that. That's gonna be. I'm
it's
excited to have that out there.
It's funny we were talking about moving because I'm at my old house
Yeah.
and doing final stuff. And I just went into, we already moved one big load out and we just had staging stuff. And in my office, I'm actually sitting in my husband's office right now with Christmas stuff behind me. Sorry about that. But I went to my bookshelf and I'm like, which books do I absolutely do not want boxed up that I need? And I ended up with like 2 feet of books, but one of them was Learn Python. So. Yes.
Oh, that's awesome. I actually have my first Python book is on Amazon right now, on the way. I'll have it tomorrow. So
Yay.
yeah, as I enter the foyer, or foyer, foyer, well, enter the mix. Yeah.
Okay.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Now, one of the things that you identified, you said the first tip you had was get your executive sponsor. Um, what are the things that you can think of to do to help either enable identifying that executive sponsor or help that executive sponsor understand like the value and the impact of the investment that they're making and the backing that they're doing in having a Power BI or now Fabric available to their company. What tips would you provide there?
One big tip, ROI. I think every project you do and every report you do needs to have an ROI calculation. It could be very rudimentary and crude. It doesn't have to be anything that big. It could be something as simple as if you make one mistake a year, I figure it costs this person this much time and assign lowball a salary to it and keep working your way down. I guarantee you, you're going to end up with a dollar value that's going to give them like, oh, this is totally worth it. But also showing them some of the things that some of the built-in AI that's right inside of Power BI. One of my big ones right now, and I'm thinking about in my Tiny Tip series, starting talking about this a little bit more, is people don't use visuals always in a very informative way. So, like, how can we put a little bit of insights into some of those things? So, one of them is like the waterfall chart. I don't see enough people using it the right way because the waterfall is supposed to be you're comparing 2 points, and I'm typically I see it more used with dates. So like year over year, let's just say that. So I'm looking at, and it goes back to that chart, that second one. Why did my sales change? Well, my sales changed because of these typical things. So if you use the waterfall correctly, you have last year's sales, you have this year's sales, and you're looking at like the top and bottom are the five things. Like if we're looking at customers, the five customers with the greatest change
Mm-hmm.
that um, that are affecting the change in this report, whether you're going up or down, it doesn't really matter. And when people start looking at the waterfall like that, then they're usually like, wow, okay. Because especially if you put some other filters on it, it will absolutely change. So if I'm looking at customers and I see the five biggest change customers and everyone else is grouped together. If I were to go in and say, okay, but what about if it's this product line, then the customers are going to change for that, and you have insights right away. I always suggest people work the decomp tree for that reason, because it's their first foray usually into doing ad hoc data analysis on their own, or data analysis period on their own. But there's a lot of visuals like this, and if you set the interaction up right, you can get all kinds of important insights right out of your system as well.
I really like when we're talking about a KPI or a metric and we're looking at change over time. I really like to include leading indicators or leading KPIs as well as trailing indicators or trailing KPIs,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, if your call volume goes down as your inbound calls, right? Like your sales volume is then going to be going down, right? Or if your
Mm-hmm.
sales volume is going down or going up, you should be expecting whatever your trailing support call is, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
as a company that, like, hey, X% of our customers are going to call and need customer service on that. Well, if we doubled here, we could expect that, in such and such time frame, right? And that
Mm-hmm.
can
Mm-hmm.
really help us get there. um
Yeah, that key performance indicator, I frequently call that. If you're looking at sales, you're basically creating your perfect customer persona and your worst customer persona, and that should tell you what's going on with it. And
yeah.
also, people need to try to find ways to get comment cards, what people think of them inside of 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 Power BI as well, so they could analyze the data on that too.
Yeah. And
Mm.
actually, while we're kind of in this topic of like helping the oh gosh, I pinned this question. I lost it then. When we're talking about supporting the executive sponsor and get people up
Mhm.
and running, right? I think, and honestly, this all goes into enablement. I think this also plays into the question that Bernard asked, and Power BI has a like well, you know, they've had this concept of a center of excellence or a community of practice or whatever you want to call it for a long time. This has been a challenge often in funding or priority. Any tips for how you can get people to get this up and running inside inside their organizations?
Yeah, I think they need to understand it could be a process, it could be a person, or it could be documentation.
Hmm.
I would I think I would do office hours. And if you do office hours and people don't show, you could always record them and let people see the recordings. But one of the things that you must do is bring your own questions. You could always say these were submitted previously and answer the questions so that you're never just sitting there. Because then, if someone just shows up to see what people are asking about because they're curious or because they want to be proven correct, then and nobody has a question, they're going to be like, I knew it, this is terrible. So always have questions that are fun, that will have a fun one, or a or an insightful one. So always have a question that's fun, like adding icons into it or doing some kind of conditional formatting. Those are a little more fun. And although don't change your colors too much, because you know how I feel about accessibility for colors, because one, and I've heard 1 in 8 and 1 in 11. So I usually the 1 in 11 men are colorblind, so you want to be careful about that. But and a lot of them don't know it. So always bring your own questions into that environment. And if anything, you're showing them that it's a learning mode as well. Try to solve a problem. One of the things you should always do as you're walking around talking to people is just ask them, if I could do anything to make your life easier here, make your
Hmm.
job easier. Besides answer the phone, what would it be? Now, I always add besides answer the phone, one, because I have a weird sense of humor and I think it's funny. Although, because we know with telephony, probably with CRM, we can make that happen. But also, I want them to think outside the box. I don't want them to constrain themselves into thinking in the world of Power BI,
Sure.
because often Power BI can solve problems that seemingly that are unrelated, that they might get saved. So you never know who's going to come up with something. So if you could get an idea from someone based off of what solves their problem. It's like, because you could always keep just diving in. Like, what did you spend your most time on today? Well, if the answer is running around trying to get, approvals done, then this is outside of the space of Fabric, but Power Automate could probably help that. And when you start solving someone problem and you start saving them oodles of time, not only can you go back to the executive sponsor with a really good ROI story, but now you have a convert who is going to be looking through the rest of their work they do. Okay, well, Chris solved this for me. What else can I do? So, yeah, that's one of the things that I would definitely recommend as well.
Well, and I think this plays office hours and how to enable a community practice. I think also goes deep into like Rishi's question here about like how would someone who's learned the fundamentals of Power BI determine what to learn next? Do they go Power Platform? Do they go Fabric? And to me, I think it plays right into what you're saying, right? Like community of practice and having
Yeah.
the office hours gives people that view into the things that are going on inside their organization that would be outside of their normal little world. And people's world can get really small, right? Like I've worked in 30,000 plus, size companies. And like I knew the people who sat like 5 cubes, around me. And that was it, right? Like, if you weren't in meetings with me and if you didn't sit within 5 cubes of me, I had no idea who you were, right?
Hmm.
Um, uh, what are your thoughts on how people should make that determination. Do they go part platform? Do they go fabric? What's your thought on that or advice?
It well, it depends upon, and I'm not giving a dollar, Kevin, so don't even say or suggest that. It depends upon what the role is. And
Hmm.
so that is a perfect thing to talk about in office hours. I mean, and going back to the original question, office hours could simply be your center of excellence first, because once you have a couple people with wins, then that's going to increase. But what to learn next is really going to depend upon what somebody's goal is. And sorry, Kevin, I see your sad face. And and what um, and what they're working on, because um, the person who is a report consumer, I mean, we do not want them learning machine learning. We do not want them learning about serverless data, right? We don't want them learning any of that. We don't want them messing with, Spark, PySpark, or any of that other Python or whatever. We don't want them. We don't want them doing that. So the journey on what you learn is going to depend upon the role. So if you start with a like a single space to have like single office hours, it might grow into two different office hours for report consumers and report designers and developers. So that's, and that's really creating then you have your success of the center of excellence happening right now. So um, that could be beneficial, but that is a very tricky question, Rishi, for sure.
Yeah, and yeah, that's a good one. And I mean,
Hmm.
um, knowing when and where to go with that stuff and getting people involved in that, I think is important. I love your comment on like come with questions in, uh, because I think that really helps people see like all the possibilities. And if you're looking for where to go with questions, look what you did in the last week, right? Like, and if you're trying to, you can just draw from that as to what what you can show people. But also, that's a good case for why you should have the COE is because you could tell everyone in your company, hey, you know what? That's a great question. I'll answer that in office hours, or you can post on this Teams channel and see if someone else can help you before then.
Hmm.
That saves you a ton of time, energy, and effort. And I think it's great, a great way to approach that stuff. Uh,
Hmm.
we did see Mark Walters mention like, hey, having a safe place to ask questions is really important. I think people are really afraid of looking like they don't know something. And I
Hmm.
mean, I don't know about you, Belinda, but I've I've been doing this for like over 2 decades. You have you've been at it a bit yourself, right? Like, do you know everything in this space, Belinda?
No.
No, right?
I rely heavily on you and a lot of the people that are on this call on a regular basis.
Right.
Yes.
And we all rely upon each other. And as people, we have to rely upon each other. We're the only ones, right? Like, I mean, in theory, maybe aliens are a thing, but like for the most part, if we are going to get help, it's going to be from one another. And we have to be able to do it. And I have the enormous ego where I call myself a data god, right? And like,
Mhm.
I don't know it all. I really don't. In fact, it's kind of a tongue in cheek, like why I did that, because like it's not possible to really know all of these things. So help
True.
people out, right?
And it's a moving target too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a new version every month and on the desktop, a new version in the cloud every week. Come on, that's crazy. So, and new modules coming out and, new pieces coming out. But, yeah, it's a constant learning thing. And because of that, there's always something cool and new to show. And so, that those they could be fun learning sessions that are just casual. And because you could also just look at reports people are building and then say, hey, you know what, let's have fun with this visual, and that could be your whole um, office hour.
I will also give one other tip for office hours is well, number one, you don't have to answer every question, right? Go ahead, put it out there. And when people ask questions, ask the community how they would solve this, right? And especially
Mm-hmm.
as you start to build up steam, don't feel like you have to answer all the questions. In fact, I'd highly recommend once you get people attending on a regular basis, so you start to recognize the people are there. Whenever someone asks community, or whenever someone asks a question, ask community to answer it, and be brave enough to be silent for an answer, right? And I say brave because it's hard. It's hard to sit in silence.
Yes, it is. It is. And and that's true. We do need to let them know. I mean, it, there's too much of this, and it's too fast and too swift and too many things coming out, that we're basically going to learn a lot of these things together. But the whole goal is to make their job easier, and that's what you got to focus on for that kind of thing. Yeah, just last Saturday, Kevin was helping me. I'm like, can you talk to me about slowly changing dimensions? And so he and with along with the help of the rest of our group, I was able to figure out what I was thinking about wasn't even a slowly changing dimension, right? So I was able to work on it. So yeah.
And that's really true, right? Like I was actually listening in on that. Apparently, I was double muted because I'm like, hey, but yes, we're not going to know it all, and we're not going to be able to like take care of it. And the more we can work as a community to reach out, like when we start going down a path and we're having problems, help reach out for help, right? You don't want to be like 30 miles down the path when you realize like I didn't bring any water with me. Where the hell am I going,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like
Mm-hmm.
help each other out, pull them back, and these things become much easier, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, gosh.
Yep.
I mean, it's just one of my favorite topics is to talk about how do we get people up and running and helping them out. I think one of the big challenges and that we're really about to embark upon is a pricing thing, Belinda. And this goes into a question that Rajesh asked about, like, how do you convince on the pricing part? It's, um, it's going to cost more than Power BI Premium. Can we pick which module we require for Fabric, i.e., DE, PBI, no other components? Blah blah blah. What have you had any thoughts on this yet, Belinda? On what we do and when it comes to talking about pricing, especially with Fabric and these new expanded capabilities?
I have, because when you present a lot, and
Hmm.
people will frequently ask pricing questions, and um, yeah, and some of you, I'm sure, have seen this, where like I know people who put slides up that say, "Don't ask me about licensing." I'm not going to answer it. But I think when it comes to Fabric, first and foremost, we have to say, look, Power BI is Power BI, right? It's you're going to get Power BI. You want to have Power BI. And then at this point, you're going to decide what you need from there. And there's um, for capacity, there are some very clear margins. So one of them is the number of users you're going to have, because there is a price point where premium is cheaper than going pro. And so, that's going to be a no brainer there. So then, if that's not the case for you, then the question is going to be, does your data require you um, to have a premium per user? And if it does, then you need to start thinking about like other sources. So one of the things that I see moving into premium per user, I don't really work with anybody for the most part. I frequently help out a little bit capacity people, but mostly I'm sticking with pro and premium per user. And the things that typically drive premium per user for me is not even size of data, although that could come into play every now and then. It's usually the complexity of data that is slow. So it's needing better accessing. Yes, Bernard, I don't want to talk about licensing either. And And one of the things that makes training more fun is you could say, talk to your partner about that. And so, or somebody, actually, Microsoft needs to build a power app that handles the pricing question. That's my theory. Um, I usually say you need a PhD from MIT to figure out pricing from Microsoft. But anyhow, I digress. So data complexity. I have run into many situations where the data set was large, although manageable still with a pro license, but the complexity ended up being something that was so slow that it really needed a better place to land, maybe using some better data flows. And this is where I'm super excited about this whole piece, the serverless piece in Fabric, because I could see that being hugely beneficial. I'm still not happy that you can't change the column names, because me with user adoption, I'm like, make the name something that makes sense, right? You can't put spaces in it. You could change it, but you can't put spaces in it.
Okay. All right. All right.
Yeah.
I was like,
Sorry. Yes. Thank you for correcting me with your look.
we can still do camel case.
Yeah, you can, but Q&A, you'd have to, like, how you'd have to go through and really update like synonyms for everything for that to work. So camel case is the best scenario though. This is true. And I love camel case because it's fun saying it, because it looks like what it is. Looks like a camel. So okay, anyhow, you know how I am. I get off track really fast. So like little like squirrel, where? Okay.
I know.
So,
I've launched my Fabric instance. I'm trying to change it right now. I'm like, I'm
okay.
pretty sure
So,
there's a mechanism for that. But okay, keep going. Keep going.
yeah,
Keep
yeah.
going.
Bernard's agreeing with me. We want spaces. So, but the complexity of their data is something that could really be beneficial, and so, for people who are, who need it. So that need it for data size. So if it's data size driving you to premium per user, then that's definitely a scenario that you would want to consider going into some of the other Fabric places. Um, Laughing at Mark too. What do we want? Spaces. When do we want it? By 2024. That's hysterical. Um,
That's funny.
um, so yeah, so that's an interesting thing. I think it gives those users a lot more options and opportunities to really to get themselves positioned for more and better AI.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Honestly, I agree. I do like to have the names be more understandable and more what? Okay. Interesting. Apparently the back end way I thought I could hack a space and locked up my data set entirely. So don't
Mhm.
do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, because I'm a fiend. Going back to user adoption, I love Q&A. I like having a single page where I put 4 Q&As, and I like loading it up with questions so that everybody can make their own. They call it a dashboard. We know it's a report page, but everyone can make their own report exactly the way they want based on the questions that you have plugged in or something that they
Spaces.
do. Spaces. You got space in there? I can't see it clearly enough yet.
Where'd it go? There it is. Day, number
Ah,
of week. Spaces.
okay.
Boom. Shakalaka,
Maybe we've been yelling at them so
shaka.
much. Okay, yeah, okay. You
Now,
got it.
it
You
did
the
lock
man.
up my SQL
You
endpoint
you the
the second
man.
I create it, but
Yeah, you the man.
so you want to do it, you create a view. You have all your tables loaded into Delta Parquet. You have a view that sits on top of it, and then you can put in all the spaces you want.
And that's totally fine with me because oh, he said Kevin's saying sure, but try to save it to the lake house. But it's a view, take
It's a
Kevin,
view
not
on top
not
of
a
it. The lake
table.
house is
Yeah,
it's already there, but now
yeah.
my view's on top of it, and I can have my views for consumption, my tables for management, like I'm supposed to have anyways, right? So
I am so excited that I could reuse my T-SQL knowledge in here. Oh gosh, because with all these languages, your dog is adorable, but DAX, M, Python, R, Parquet, JSON. It goes on and on. T-SQL. For years, I've been joking that the next language Microsoft will come out with will be called Functional Universal, or FU, because we have there's so many different ones to learn. So I am delighted that I can enjoy one of my first loves of getting data the way I want it in a view.
yeah.
Oh, he says time for a meeting later.
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh, we are at time. Oh,
Oh,
Belinda.
uh,
And sorry, there. Wow, for the first time ever, we had questions that we didn't get to. But this has been.
oh.
Oh my. Wait, I got to turn this off. I guess.
Well, thank you everyone for asking questions that sorry we couldn't get to all of them. That makes me really happy.
Yeah, yeah, and Belinda, yes, thank you for coming and joining us today and talking about a subject that is so near and dear to our hearts.
Well, thanks for inviting me, because every time we talk, you make me think. And when I'm driving around, I'm like, oh, yeah. So, you and all of our wonderful SML people, but yes, and you always make me laugh. So I love that.
Well, I agree. You're one of my favorite people in this space, and
Yay!
happy to that we get to work together and do stuff. So, Belinda, thank you for joining us. Hey, everybody out there for coming in. Thank you guys so much for joining us today as well. Don't forget, um, me and Kevin Arnold are doing Fabric Fridays. So this is 7:30 to 8:30 a.m. every single Friday. We go deep into a topic on fabric and we start to talk through some stuff. This is like a legit YouTube channel too. I do have videos out there. My AdventureWorks data set is videos going out tomorrow where I have a GitHub repo. I got the whole 9 that you'll get with it. So like if you want a data set to build your reports to do sample stuff off of inside the fabric space, you're going to have access to that tomorrow. So do check that out. But with that, uh, Belinda, any parting words?
Yeah, definitely watch their Fabric Friday. That's really cool. And I have thank you, all of my wonderful friends out there. But I do have a
Yes.
request for one of your Fabric Fridays.
Uh-huh.
Kind of like do basics on how someone would start using Git in terms with Power BI.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
would love
I
that.
should I should I should take you on my Git journey because I'm just barely banging my head and stubbing my toe on that as well. So,
Hmm.
um, we'll get that out for you guys as well. So, but thank you very much,
Thanks.
everyone. You guys have a great day. Stay safe and enjoy yourselves working with these wonderful tools. Have a good one. Peace. Oh no, this is a live stream. I can't do that. That's a different button. See ya.
Bye.
Baker Tilly Digital combines strategic industry insight and advanced technical expertise to uncover and solve your digital transformation challenges. If you're interested in learning more, check out our website at bakertilly.com/digital.